Hello and welcome to Morningstar Journal News. Today we're going to have with us a special guest, Marc Nuttle. He's a lawyer that has been practicing law for decades, and he's also an economist that has helped advise. He does a lot of financial advising, and he has helped in campaigns, political campaigns for presidents and other candidates. So thank you so much for being with us here today, Marc.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about you and what you do and your experience?
Well, I'm born and bred Oklahoman. I spent my entire life to get my education through law school. And at the beginning of about 1974, when I got to law school, there was this situation where the President of the United States resigned from office. From that came the Federal Campaign Act, and new ways to run for office were implemented that most elected officials were unfamiliar with. I was asked to review that document, that code and those laws, and I became a specialist on federal election law from Oklahoma, working for a United States senator. I ended up representing, it was the beginning of my career, about 15 senators and 45 congressmen on their personal matters as their lawyer on how to conduct their business, run for office, and be in full compliance with the federal law. That led to a career of being involved in international economics. I wanted to be involved in international foreign affairs. They allowed me to do that. When the wall came down and started to come down, actually as early as 1989, we didn't know it was coming down that quick, but there were countries seeking advice on how to declare independence, how to become free, and how to form a democracy. And I became part of a team that did that, advising those countries, and was fortunate enough to be able to work in many parts of the world, in Europe and Russia, former Iron countries behind the Iron Curtain. I've worked in the Middle East. I've worked in Israel. I represented China for 3 years on helping them reset and establish their Federal Reserve System. I had worked in every part of the world except Central and South America, and here in the last 5 years, I've been working there now, so I've come full circle.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, why don't you share with us a little bit about what is happening with inflation? What are some of the factors that are affecting the economy right now for the prices to be going up and up and up?
Well, it's a complicated subject, but the bottom line is that inflation is almost always a matter of monetary policy. Too much money chasing too few goods, just too much money in the people's hands to even exceed the normal demand. Now, what's caused this? We've forgotten that back in 2008 we had a financial crisis that actually almost caused a meltdown in the financial systems in the world. I mean, Lehman Brothers was liquidated. There were currency and debt problems among major nations around the world, and money was moved around, recalibrated that began then, but it wasn't put directly into the people's hands. It was mainly through the banking system. We entered into a system called quantitative easing, where the Federal Reserve accumulated large accounts on their balance sheet and bought toxic assets from the banks to keep them liquid. And so money's still out there in the system, but it's still, as long as it goes through the banks and not directly to people's hands, it didn't stimulate the economy for a long time. And you can't have inflation without demand. I mean, still, too much money chasing too few goods means people are actually looking for the goods. Well, they weren't until recently. Now, what really set this on fire is that the COVID relief package and funds, and there's been various ones of them. There have been to the individuals of American citizens twice. There have been packages for the states, federal, and local governments. There have been other special bailouts, Native American tribes, and I'd say bailouts, but give and rescue packages of cash directly into their hands, outside the banks, adding to the money supply. The United States has printed and infused into the system, by some calculations, depends on how you count debt, that may or may not ever be paid back to just direct grants that most Americans got, of $12 trillion. Now, to put this in the context of how much money that is, that's over 50% of the gross domestic product in an 18-month period. I mean, $1 to $2 trillion is a lot of money to add to the system. The reason I went back to 2008 is that the federal government still believes that there's a lot of bank assets that can be managed that would absorb this, and it wouldn't be too much money chasing too few goods, and they were wrong. Larry Summers, a Democratic treasurer of the United States, warned that this would be inflationary, and as many others did too. And now he's been proven to be right. And so what does this do to the world? Well, the dollar is the world's currency. And in some cases, the primary currency, not the reserve currency. And so what we do to the dollar in the United States impacts the entire world, because we're the largest banking system, the world's currency, and the largest market. We consume 50% of what many countries make. This is where they sell it and we buy it. And now it's got to be purchased in dollars. Oil has to be purchased in dollars. All commodities have to be purchased in dollars, wheat, other things. And so to get into that currency, the size of the American economy dictates the price of a dollar everywhere in the world. And it's inflationary here. It's even more inflationary around the world as they pay a cost for getting in the exchange rate of their currencies into the dollar and back into their local currency. So that's the underlying reasons of inflation. Now, how long will it last? Well, it'll last a long time if they don't rein it in. And, of course, raising interest rates, making the cost of money more, is part of what you do to cool down an economy, and people then hold it, save it, do something else with it, even if they've got cash. And that's what's happening. That's what the Federal Reserve did just, 2 days ago. Raised it, 50 basis points, I think, half a point. And probably more to come. That's affected the stock market and other things. How does that impact the dividends of equities, stocks, and of course the bond market is a different subject. So your question, how long will it last? It will last as long as government doesn't do something to control the activity and velocity and turnover of funds, which sometimes is unpopular with the public. Now, there's a difference between economic principles and political expediency. We're in an election year. Mm-hmm. So how Congress reacts to this in anticipation of who voters will hold accountable in November may add to the length of it down the road if they do anything to try to ease the pain of inflation artificially. You should just let it go, let interest rates rise, and there are mechanisms in place that will take care of themselves. Politicians are sometimes adverse at doing that.
Mm. So what is one of the effects that has these interest rates increased into the economy? Like, what are the effects that we're going to see tangible in the stock market or in prices or in the movement of money in general?
Well, the Federal Reserve sets the interest rates, the prime rate and internal rate for borrowing between banks, which then is passed through to the consumer when they borrow money from a bank. I mean, that's an oversimplification, but how it works. And so when they raise interest rates, the Federal Reserve is raising the cost of capital to everybody, including banks, to use the U.S. dollar. Now, the impact of that, of course, is prices rise. In addition to oil, there are other commodities that are impacted. The Ukrainian war is causing some of this. And remember, I didn't mention COVID except for the relief funds. COVID disrupted the supply chains even more than we may realize. What does that mean? I mean, the component parts of a manufacturing entity may come from different parts of the world as part of the supply chain. Food and food processing, the food may be grown in one place, processed in another, and distributed someplace else. That's part of the supply chain. You disrupt any component of that, it's either got to be replaced or the logistics cost more to realign new chains. That's all going on before our very eyes. There's shortages of shipping. There's shortages of truck drivers as the system completely resets itself from a total world shutdown, which is unprecedented in modern times. So those are all cost factors too. But too much money chasing too few goods is a monetary policy problem. It must be curtailed, and the way to do it is to raise interest rates. Raises costs across the board. You see it in rents. If you're on a fixed income, that's who it hurts the most. You're on Social Security or a government check, and it's a fixed check. Prices go up. Purchasing power is less. In inflationary times, the dollar buys less. The same dollar buys less goods. In deflationary times, the price of the dollar prices drop, but the dollar buys more things because the prices drop. We're in inflationary times. That's the immediate impact of inflation.
And what do you think the impact is going to be, or what has the impact been in the past of the raising interest rates and how that affects the stock market, for example?
Well, you raise interest rates to reduce the turnover of funds. In other words, dollars become more expensive and they're used less for the same transaction, and that cools down activities and cools down the economy. It also costs more money to borrow money because interest rates are higher, and that all curtails the activity, the use of the dollar. You've got reserve capital, you have no debt. You will buy less because it costs more to do it. You'll save your money. That's the immediate effect. And that's the tool you use to cool down the economy and kind of rein in the use of capital. That frightens or spooks the stock market because corporations' costs are going to be up. As prices rise, there'll be less demand for the product. The corporation will have less profits, and therefore its equity is worth less, and the stock market goes down.
Oh, okay.
And so as the Fed, what's spooking the market right now is the Fed have said, they've been saying all along they're going to raise rates. And they meet monthly, internally, and quarterly announce these decisions. And the fear, the stock market is supposedly the evaluation of all knowledge that's known or should be known. And it's not just exactly what they did today, but also what they said, that there's more increases likely to come. And so if there's more increases likely to come, you want to get out before those increases go into effect, because when they finally do go into effect, the corporation's dividends will drop or its profitability will be less, and you'll want to get out at that point. And then, of course, there's a contending bond market that's struggled for really a decade now. The bond market needs about 4.2% interest rates to, sorry.
You're good. We can edit.
It's just, I forget, it rings in my ear. I'm sorry. For the bond market to be efficient, bonds work off interest rates, and they react differently to the stock market. In other words, when the stock market's down, bonds are usually up, and bonds down is because you're into equities and you're into companies, and you're not needing to borrow them. You're not investing in some bonds. The reason they need 4.2% is that there's a piece of the industry that buys investments, and it's called annuities. So the Teachers Retirement Fund of New York takes its money and places it with a major bank who has bid on that, saying, I will take this amount of money and I will pay you this amount in a payment no matter what, like to fund the Teachers Retirement Fund. Okay? And the teachers need their money. They're not worried about, the Teachers Retirement Fund of New York is not worried about you investing it in the equity markets and the principal grows. They're only worried about you take this amount of money and you guarantee those payments on a regular basis so those teachers can retire and receive their retirement check. And what the entity that's taken that fund is betting that they can make more money on the interest than they have to pay out in the fund for the retirement. And they need at least 4.2% to do that. And when rates are low, which they have been for a long time, it really strains the bond market because they can't get the return of the bond market to counter what's going on in the stock market. So a lot of that money has actually found its way into the stock market because these are guaranteed. They have to make these payments. That's by contract. It's called an annuity. And they make it however they can or however the law allows them. Some of these funds have to be in AAA treasuries or AAA rated investments. But that's how it affects it. And the fact that we have so much debt in government, it's a problem for the federal government because we're now over $30 trillion in debt. Now that's scheduled debt. That's coupon punch debt with an interest rate. That's not contingent liabilities and what they may have to pay in the future in health care. We're talking about borrowed money that has to be paid back on a scheduled basis with a certain interest rate. And you raise interest rate. Now, a lot of that's, and most of that is not just short-term, it's not long-term debt. And so you raise every interest point of the interest rate that you raise through a monetary policy, the debt to the United States government to service that debt and the increased spending is about $900 billion, close to $1 trillion.
Wow.
And so the catch-22 becomes, it is impossible to have economic growth without cost of capital. Makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Got to pay something for the capital, nothing else the processing fees. But right now, the government is in a catch-22 because it doesn't want interest rates to rise too much because it can't afford the rise in interest rates to pay the existing accumulated debt of over $30 trillion. And so you can't have growth without cost of capital, but you can't have the rise of cost of capital and still pay the debt. You're kind of in a gridlock, catch-22.
Of course, because if you raise the interest rates, you're basically doing damage to your own payment of the debt that you have to pay.
Correct.
But it's needed for the economy right now.
That's correct.
So it's a hard situation. Wow. And what do you think about some Americans that have turned to the cryptocurrency market as a means of protecting their investment or savings, or do you think it's a good place to save your money or to keep your
Well, first,
assets?
let's be careful. I'm not a financial advisor, and I don't tell people what to do with their money. So let's just talk about it in general terms, crypto versus something else. If I wanted a deposit of wealth, I mean, crypto is not a currency. It's not a medium of exchange anywhere in the world today. Yeah, you can buy and do stuff with it, but it's not a generally accepted term for the cost of a good or a service. And crypto, when spent, by the way, and you buy something in crypto, it's always tied to the price in dollars. Nobody knows what a Bitcoin is except how it's valued in dollars. Nobody knows what Ethereum is except it's tied to a dollar. And when I ask people, so when you're going to invest in a crypto, how would you value what that's worth, and don't value it in dollars? Don't use the word dollar. And they just stare at you like, I don't know how to do that. And I said, that's because the dollar is still the only medium of exchange of value. Now, you want to protect wealth. Gold that's what gold is. And you can buy and sell some things in gold, and you can barter with gold better than you can anything else. But I personally don't see the advantage of crypto. Here's my problem with crypto. If you're going to do that, buy something that's tangible, gold, silver, copper, those kinds of things, and they'll always be worth something in some currency because they have value as a metal, regardless of whatever currency is being used to calibrate it. Right? Mm-hmm. And so if we went to a cryptocurrency and I've got gold, it'll still have value. The dollar may not, but gold will, whatever the system is. The problem with crypto for me as an economist is to manage a monetary supply requires the intelligence of a human being to monitor it. In other words, most cryptos are tied to a mathematical algorithm that's fixed. It's not flexible, and that's supposed to be the value of the currency, is it? Well, we don't trust governments to manage our currency anymore. They're going to put us into oblivion. Inflation is going to explode. Your dollar's not going to be worth anything. The dollar's not going to exist. Well, we don't know those things. That's pretty shrill advice. But that's the idea behind what is the problem that crypto solves? Well, there really isn't one, other than you don't believe the dollar is going to survive. So you're trying to get into something else. Mm-hmm. But a hard, cold mathematical algorithm about how many Bitcoins will be, or Ethereum, or whoever else controls the supply. It's not guys sworn in to office, nominated and confirmed by a government to do the best they can to keep the amount of money chasing goods at equilibrium so that the prices stabilize. Now, what are the intervening events of human society that a hard mathematical algorithm can't account for? COVID, pandemics, natural disasters, floods, earthquakes, tsunamis, all these things in a spot cause damages, deaths, things that have to be handled, and you spend money to save people's lives, and then you tighten it up and get it back out of the system to get back to equilibrium. Mm-hmm. No crypto can do that.
Yeah.
Now, and is crypto safe on hacking? I don't know. But the reason that crypto, is my understanding, that ever came into existence is that it was an alternative to sovereign currencies because nobody trusted sovereigns to ever manage them ultimately to safety, where it would be a safe investment in the future. At the same time, I don't see how any cryptocurrency gets us through crisis, natural disasters, crisis, pandemics. And economies are driven by the emotions of people. Sometimes it's generational. People buy too much. We don't know why. People save. We don't always know why. But when they do, that changes the demand and pressures on the money. And you need human beings looking at it on a daily basis, talking to banks and central banks saying, what's your need for capital, and working with a system to make sure you got exactly the right amount of money, chasing exactly the right amount of goods.
Yeah, basically for a monetary system, you need flexibility.
Yes.
You need a human being that can understand human beings and the emotions of people and know how to respond with the monetary policy.
Yes.
Yeah. And now turning the topic around about, this is an election year, you said it, and you have helped in campaigns for many presidents and a lot of candidates. What do you see about this election year and how things can play out? And because we've heard a lot here on the newsroom about a red wave coming, and what do you see about that?
Well, up until a week ago, the evidence for a conservative or Republican or a red wave tsunami was compelling. We're about to get to the point in the cycle. You get past July, August, and normally whatever you got, September, October, November, it doesn't change. I mean, the emotions are set by then. And again, the evidence would indicate there's a lot of dissatisfaction with this administration. It's driven by control of schools and education, and the fact that there still seems to be this ongoing debate about whether teachers should take input from parents on how their students are taught, local control of schools. The second, and probably the most driving factor, is inflation. Who caused it? Why? How long is it going to last? I believe we had to do certain things to get through COVID. Whether we had to spend that much money, I don't know. But the fact that inflation's here and politicians are acting like they're surprised by it is really unacceptable. I mean, we should have been warning Americans a long time ago and doing things to help them get through this to keep prices down. There's things we could have done 6-9 months ago in advance of this that would have been helpful, and they're going to hold this administration accountable for that. The third is just the lack of trust in institutions, the Afghanistan pullout, the things that are being said in Congress that don't seem to be germane and relative to their current needs. They seem to be worried about the wrong things. So I think it's real. Now, how this leak of Justice Alito's opinion on abortion will impact things, we don't know. It will change the dynamics somewhat. It'll energize a progressive base. It is their issue. It overrides education, inflation, or anything else. And it's going to be a month where the opinion's issued, and then what will happen then? Well, nobody knows for sure. The fact that it came out early, many think will impact the momentum and the intensity of the campaign, which will lessen the impact of the red wave. I'm not so sure that a month out that it won't help conservatives be energized also. If I had to guess today, the abortion issue does probably restrict the Republicans' ability to win a few Senate seats that they might have won otherwise. Whether it's a 50-50 split or the Democrats add a seat or two, that could be the possible outcome of that. However, 6 seats will, I guess, bring the House back, or 7. We'll turn it back into Republican control. That's very likely, even with the abortion issue now moving to the top of the agenda as a priority. If that's the case, then in January we go immediately into the presidential cycle. Is President Biden going to run for re-election at his age? It's not likely that it'll be an open field for Kamala Harris. I think if President Biden stepped down, he needs to step down and let the process work, and she probably won't be, I would guess, not the nominee. Who that would be, I don't know. What Republicans will run, I don't know. No one does. It's too early. There's obviously still pushback against just the institutions of the federal government. President Trump's endorsements in Ohio this last Tuesday were very successful. Ohio is it's not a moderate state, but it's not a right-wing or left-wing state. It's representative, really, of the country. And so I'd say that presence of people trying to find something other than just the elected leaders they have now is very formidable.
Wow. So you think maybe the debate will switch to from the inflation and all these other topics to the abortion topic?
I think those issues will still be important. I just think that they may lose their positioning and priority.
Okay.
And many voters don't vote on just one issue.
That's true.
But probably not more than three. So the three issues may now be abortion, education, and COVID protocol. Who knows how it'll position. And yet to be seen how it'll break out. There's a lot of people who are very, very worried about abortion rights for women that are really more worried about education of their children. I mean, and
that's true.
They may even make abortion the #1 priority, but still decide to vote for a certain candidate based upon some education problem in their district.
Yeah, so we cannot predict exactly what's going to happen, but at least we know this is going to have a great impact in the result or the debate, current debate. So, Marc, how can people find you on the web or read about all the analysis you have done and everything you do?
Well, you can start with Marc, M-A-R-C, Nuttle, Nuttle.com. A lot of things are posted there. I have a website. In the next, particularly next 30 days, I'll be posting a lot of this analysis on economic trends, how I see it playing out in the election, and what as individuals you need to be worried about.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, thank you, Marc, for being here, and thank you for everything you do.
Well, thank you very much.
Amazing.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
It's amazing. And thank you for connecting and tuning in to Morningstar Journal News. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and you can find us on our webpage, morningstarjournal.com. Thank you for watching. God bless you, and God bless America.